Thank you, Deep-Royd Clywyd. In the first instance, I find it very difficult to justify going forward with this pilot because I cannot see why potentially tens of millions of pounds of public money should be spent on something that the Welsh Government does not have legislative competence to roll out wholesale. As we all know, we have some very big challenges here in Wales that, in my mind, are much higher priorities to spend public money on. Do we really want to spend this money on helping a select few, when we should be looking at improving educational attainment, improving access to hospital, dental and GP appointments, and improving employment outcomes? Indeed, Deep-Royd Clywyd, two of the major issues for residents living in my region are air quality and chronic illness. And spending money on pet projects such as this, when we have so many other pressing needs, is ridiculous, and quite frankly, a dereliction of duty. What is more, if a 4-day working week was actually implemented, without a cut in pay in the public sector in Wales, it would simply be a 20% pay rise for a third of the in-work population in Wales, at the expense of the rest of the working population that's in the private sector, and who actually generate the money to pay for public services. This is grossly unfair, and it will also create a two-tier working environment where private companies, primarily SMEs, that cannot afford to match these working hours will find it disproportionately hard to recruit and retain staff. I can see that working fewer hours can be positive to some people's personal health and well-being, but the idea of imposing a strict 4-day working week is extremely limiting because it cannot be rolled out across all sectors without taking on more staff to keep the same level of public service. The cost to the public purse, as already highlighted, will also be truly enormous, and studies have shown that a 4-day working week where 4-day working weeks have been adopted, the 20% drop in availability of public services causes more harm than good for the rest of the population. Proponents of the 4-day working week, in my mind, are blinded to the negatives of such an approach because they can only perceive overwhelming positives. But we have to bear in mind that the 4-day working week approach has been trialled extensively, and whilst it has worked for some, it most certainly hasn't worked for everyone. Indeed, I think I could spend the entirety of the time allocated to this debate explaining why introducing a 4-day working week trial is not only short-sighted, but doesn't achieve the outcomes that it claims, and cites studies right across the world, including Japan, Belgium, the United States, where these trials have categorically failed. But unfortunately, Deep-Royd Clywyd, I only have 5 minutes. Many people have found that the push to complete the amount of work in 4 days instead of 5 has led to considerable drop in teamwork and collaboration, as employees are so focused on getting their tasks done in a tighter time frame, and it has made workloads overall less manageable. Moreover, younger people starting out in their careers will have considerably less opportunity to network with colleagues and get to know those people who will be instrumental in their careers, and this damages potential for their future. And this is heightened more by the sheer amount of public sector workers who are still working from home.
Thanks for giving away. I just wonder what your thoughts would be on Sony Pencoed. Sony Pencoed don't operate a 4-day week. They operate a 4.5-day week. They finish early on Fridays, always have done for years, because they've seen the increase in productivity and the attraction of recruitment to young people. Do you think they are missing something here?
My view has always been if a private sector want to do this, they're fully entitled to. But as a public purse, I think there are higher priorities that we should be spending our money on. And while the loss of those soft skills may seem negligible points to some people, they are in fact essential for many workers and industries. It seems obvious to me that this drive for wholesale shorter hours has many potential disadvantages that are just being ignored. Furthermore, I find two aspects of the justification for introducing a 4-day working week quite bizarre. Firstly, that it should be introduced because high numbers of workers would support such a change. But this is specious reasoning. Who in their right mind wouldn't take a reduction in working hours for the same pay? This is ultimately an invalid argument to justify a 4-day working week. Secondly, there is the idea that this productivity gain will essentially allow workers to reduce their hours. But there's so many different ways of measuring productivity depending on the type of work people are doing that there's no standardization across the workplace. So a trial will not accurately produce any meaningful data that could be extrapolated across all sectors. What I mean here is that productivity measurement of a teacher will be measured differently to that of a nurse, and this will be measured differently to a council employee processing job applications, for example, and so on. In addition, there are also many external factors that affect productivity that cannot be controlled by an organisation, which means that a 90% workforce productivity one week could easily look like a 60% productivity the following week. What also concerns me is that higher productivity for prolonged periods also leads to burnout and people enjoying their jobs less. And we have seen this in the NHS with the COVID pandemic. And this drive to work people harder for shorter periods is just not conducive to a healthy working life. And I'm conscious of the time deprived, Clough, so I'll just close. And whilst I and my group will note the report today, in truth, I believe that what we need in our workforce is additional flexibility given to employees throughout the working day to help them better balance the needs of family and health and to make work and the work environment a more positive aspect within people's lives. Thank you.